I would like to remind you that today we are resuming meeting number 27 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, which was suspended last Thursday. The committee is meeting in public today and is being televised. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members may be attending in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application. Madam Clerk, I am assuming that everyone is attending virtually today?
That is correct.
All right, so just a few rules to go over. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. When you are done speaking, please put your mic on mute to minimize any interference. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Unless there are exceptional circumstances, the use of headsets with a boom microphone is mandatory for everyone participating remotely. And as always, should any technical challenges arise, please advise the chair. And note that we may need to suspend a few minutes as we want to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Our witnesses from last Thursday have been invited back and are standing by to answer our questions if and when debate on the motion is concluded and questioning can be resumed. I will just go over the list of guests who are waiting to join us, and that way we won't have to do it once, as I stated, if we are able to resume questioning. So joining us today from the Office of the Auditor General are Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada, Philippe Legault, Principal, and Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General. From the Canada Revenue Agency, we have Mark Lemieux, Assistant Commissioner, Collections and Verification Branch, Ted Gallivan, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Programs Branch, and Frank Vermeten, Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefit and Service Branch. And Mr. Hamilton, Commissioner of Revenue and Chief Executive Officer, will be joining us a bit later. And from the Department of Finance, we have Andrew Marsland, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Tax Policy Branch, and Moidrag Jovanovic, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister. The Deputy Minister, Michael Sabia, sends his regrets. Due to a conflict in his schedule, he is not able to attend this morning. Just one more thing before we get started. At last Thursday's meeting, Mr. Blois asked the clerk if she could prepare a document outlining the principal issues of cabinet confidentiality and the powers of the committee to call for papers. She informed me that this issue has been raised before in Public Accounts Committee, and in February 28th, the committee received a briefing from the law clerk and the counsel to the clerk of the Privy Council on this matter. If it is the wish of the committee, we could arrange to have a briefing on these issues with these individuals. Are there any comments or questions about that?
Je pense qu'on a reçu,
Madam Chair, I think we received a notice of motion from our colleague Maxime, who requests precisely that we proceed in that manner. So perhaps we could discuss that then.
Thank you very much. I will move on. When the committee suspended the meeting on Thursday last week, we were debating the amendment of Mr. Fergus. Would you like me to read it into the record again to refresh everyone's memory on what is being debated? Mr. Longfield? Oh, you are muted.
I don't think that's necessary. We might have a further amendment coming.
All right. Then what I will do, if the rest of the committee is in agreement, I would turn the floor over to Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in view of the fact that I had an opportunity to discuss things with my colleagues, I will right away propose that we vote on the amendment from Mr. Fergus so that we may return to my main motion. And I think Mr. Longfield will then have a proposed amendment to put forward, which could then be debated, and we would save a lot of time then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. Colleagues, are you ready for me to call the vote on the amendment to the main motion? I believe that it will have to be a recorded vote. So, Madam Clerk, can you advise as to how we proceed?
Certainly, I will call the vote, and as I name members, they will indicate yay or nay for the amendment from Mr. Longfield's amendment, or excuse me, Mr. Fergus's amendment from Thursday. So, Mr. Longfield.
Nay, please.
Okay, Mr. Blois.
Against.
Mr. Fergus.
Against.
Mr. Sobera.
Nay, please.
Ms. Yip.
Against.
Monsieur Berthold. Mr. Phillip, or Mr. Lawrence, excuse me.
Mr. Phillip is fine. Nay.
Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber.
Sorry, my nay.
Thank you. Monsieur Blanchet-Janca.
Contre.
And Mr. McGregor.
Nay.
So, Madam Chair, that is 10 nays.
All right. Then I will declare the amendment defeated, and I will turn it back to Mr. Berthold to speak to his motion.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think that I would like to ask my colleague, Mr. Longfield, to present an amendment that he had me read prior to today's meeting. So then we will be able to debate that amendment if the committee agrees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Mr. Berthold for the work on this. It's great when we can try to resolve issues and put them forward for debate for the committee. My motion reads as follows. My amendment reads as follows. The committee requests the Department of Finance and Canada Revenue Agency provide the committee with all studies, data, and analysis used for the implementation of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. That these documents be provided to the committee with redactions for cabinet confidence and personal information, and that these documents be provided to the committee no later than May 27th, 2021. And I've circulated that in both languages to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longfield. Colleagues, you have the amendment in front.
Vous avez l'amendement devant vous, il vous a été envoyé. Je vais maintenant ouvrir la discussion sur l'amendement.
Madame la Présidente, je peux y aller?
Madam Chair, may I go ahead? Yes.
Yeah, je pense.
Madam Clerk, I believe that the amendment ought to begin by saying that a substitute after the word that the committee, the words from Mr. Longfield, if we want to handle it as amendment, because as presented, it sounds like a new motion.
Sweet.
In other words, the amendment would follow after the motion, Mr. Berthold, or come before it. I think that we could have Mr. Longfield's motion. It could be that we delete all the words in the first motion after that, and then replace it by the words of the motion of Mr. Longfield.
Ça va? Okay.
Is that all right? And to the amendment, I would like to know from my colleagues, first of all, I would just like to come back over certain words from last week briefly to say that when we engage in discussions such as this topic, it's not a partisan or non-partisan matter. Unfortunately, we were presented with the fact that I was bringing forward this motion in a partisan manner. No, it was a motion that aimed to further clarify or inform all the members of the committee from all parties, and I believe that that was the laudable purpose of it. And I think that, once again, unanimity in this committee is not necessary for each of our decisions, which is a point of honor of the committee, to have relations that are done unanimously or decision unanimous. But I can reiterate, we cannot always agree on all the interventions that we make. So I think it's worthwhile to clarify that the intervention that was made was to further inform the committee, and the motion before us now, the amendments proposed by Mr. Longfield, will enable everyone to get the answers we want to obtain, to move further, that will give us a report, which I hope will then become a unanimous report from the Committee of Public Accounts. Perhaps just one question, Mr. Longfield. Could you please explain the delay? Why do we have to wait until May 27th before we obtain? That is the date that was put in my first motion. I have to have it quite soon so that we can move ahead more quickly. So I would like Mr. Longfield to explain, please, why he chose the date of May 27th for obtaining all of the documents.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Luke. I've checked in with the departments to see what work would be entailed, and they've got several hundred pages that would have to be translated. Normally, our committee has passed a motion for a 3-week notice of getting information back to us from standard questions that we've asked during our witness testimony. This is a little bit bigger than a standard question because of the amount of work that's going to go into the translation, as well as the proper redaction of information to protect cabinet confidence. So a little bit extra work on this. It's no later than May 27th, which would give us time to have this included through the analysts in our report consideration. And when it comes to the report consideration in June, that we would be able to roll this into our report that we can then consider and debate. So I think we've got a very heavy schedule in front of us with lots of studies coming forward between now and the end of May. And this would allow us to continue that work as well as be ready for the report when it comes before us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Longfield. Mr. Berthold.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask us to move ahead to the vote on the amendment from Mr. Longfield.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't see any other hands from colleagues looking to make an intervention. So if you are ready, I will call the question on the amendment put forward by Mr. Longfield. Madam Clerk?
Yes. So the vote on Mr. Longfield's amendment, Mr. Longfield.
Yay.
Mr. Blois.
Agreed.
Mr. Fergus.
En faveur.
Mr. Sobera.
Oui.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold.
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yay.
Mr. Weber.
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchet Jean-Claude.
En faveur.
And Mr. McGregor.
Nay.
So we have 9 yeas and 1 nay.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I will declare the amendment carried. And now we will vote on the motion as amended. Unless there is any further discussion before we go to the vote. Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Longfield.
Yay.
Mr. Blois.
Yay.
Mr. Fergus.
En faveur.
Mr. Sobera.
La même chose, en favor.
Ms. Yip,
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold,
Oui.
Mr. Lawrence,
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchet-Janco,
En favor.
and Mr. McGregor.
Yay.
That is 10 yeas, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. I am grateful and thankful that we were able to. Oh, Mr. Fergus,
Please
did you have?
continue, Madam Chair.
I just wanted to express my thanks for the work that you did in coming to a resolution that I think was agreeable to everybody, obviously with a unanimous vote in favor of this amended motion.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, I would also like to add my thanks to Mr. Berthold and Mr. Longfield for having engaged in this debate so as to return things to our spirit as a team in the Public Accounts Committee. Hats off to Mr. Berthold and to Mr. Longfield and to all my colleagues here. Well done. I'm very pleased to be part of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Colleagues, I will then resume the questioning of the witnesses that we had before us last Thursday. And so I would ask that they be entered into the room, so to speak. Great, I see them here. And we will continue where we left off last Thursday. And I believe we were, Mr. Berthold was in the middle of his 6-minute questioning time. The clerk tells me that you have a little over 3 minutes left to continue with your questioning of our witnesses. Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to yield these 3 minutes to Mr. Lawrence, my colleague, because I spoke a lot the last time.
Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question will be to the Auditor General. And once again, I'd like to thank you for all of your work. I know you've been just in committees alone for hours and hours and hours, much as actually accomplishing the work of the Auditor General. So thank you very much. One of the issues that's given rise to some one of the concerns that has given rise to some issues for my constituents and I think constituents across the country is the work interplay between the CRA and the SDC. And in 7.53, the memorandum, you say the memorandum of understanding of the Employment and Social Development Canada on the emergency benefits during COVID-19 did not allow for a work sharing agreement for information described. There's been a number of issues along the pandemic with government agencies working towards working together. I was just wondering if the Auditor General could comment on that and see if this is a real concern and an issue she has, and if she has any solutions for the government as well. I'd love to hear those.
Thank you very much for your nice comments. I'm always pleased to attend any committee hearing to discuss our work. I think that's the worst thing for an Auditor General's office would be for us to do all this work and no one want to discuss it with us. So always pleased to be present at committees. What we saw in many of our audits was that departments, even within a department, there are certain silos, and I'll use an example in the Canada Revenue Agency. The side that deals with businesses is very segregated from the side that deals with individuals. That's done to protect the integrity of the information. So it's always good and the best practice to have that information sharing agreement between different departments when they need to share information. In a pandemic, even more important when there's an interplay between who leads a certain program, when you don't want to have doubling up or potential overpayments when programs overlap each other or should be deducted from each other. So it's important to work through how collaboration is supposed to work in normal times, but also how collaboration is supposed to work in an emergency situation. It just makes it easier for every Canadian to interact with its government when they're talking about relevant information.
So on that, both internal and intra-internal, I guess I guess the right word, in the departments, was it because I haven't necessarily received an answer as to why these communications didn't happen? Did the department say because of privacy reasons, or is it an IT issue, or is it all of the above?
I think the two aspects that you listed would be some of the reasons that we heard, the most important being privacy issue, but at times it is technological. At times I think it's just the speed. So I do think that every situation is different and unique and requires the departments to discuss with fellow departments when they need to interact together.
And I've seen a number of cases where people have applied to ESDC and not gotten, and then been denied by CRA because there was an existing claim. Have maybe the CRA or the ESDC, could you comment? Are those issues fully resolved yet, or are we still looking for a solution here?
A very short answer to that question, please.
Frank Vermonten here from the CRA. I think for the most part, those issues have been resolved, but they're ongoing as new little exceptions will come up. But a good system has been put in place in issues where individuals are blocked from being able to access the CRB, for example, because they have an open EI claim. And a mechanism has been put in place to resolve that. So I would say it's going to be ongoing as we manage through the exceptions, but for the most part, it has been resolved.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Mr. Longfield for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for coming back today. My first question is for the Auditor General. Amongst the findings that we saw in the audit, it included one major obstacle was the prepayment validations. And the agency couldn't always have the most up-to-date information on file to assess an applicant's revenues. The information would have allowed the agency to validate the reasonableness and magnitude of the applicant's declared revenue drop. I'm wondering what kind of information should have been available for the application review, in your opinion, and what additional time would have been required for us to see the prepayment verifications done. I know that this was also discussed in report 6 about the balance between speed and accuracy.
So you're correct that there was a decision made to prioritize speed over prepayment controls, which are typically seen. I guess two instances here that I would cite in the wage subsidy program. There would have been information available about revenues for businesses who had applied for the wage subsidy, given that that was one of the criteria, that there needed to be a decline in revenue. So that would either come from the T2 return, which is the corporate tax return, or some GST returns. Now, the constraints that you have here is not everyone is a GST filer. Sometimes GSTs are filed monthly, quarterly, or annually. Corporate tax returns are filed annually. So some of it was timing of when these filings would have normally occurred. But we did note in the audit that there were many instances of late filers, and that impedes the ability to look at revenue. Another item would have been looking at payroll, sort of the average payroll information. And again, that is an annual interaction typically with the Canada Revenue Agency when T4 summaries are filed at the end of a calendar year. So some of it is that technology, but other times it was, just late information.
Thank you. And I know as members of parliament, we saw almost every permutation and combination of what fit, what didn't fit, sole proprietors, and all of the rest, all the different ways that businesses are registered and operating in Canada. Really showed up at the beginning of the pandemic. So thank you for that. A further question for finance. According to this report, Finance Canada only performed a partial analysis of the initial Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program due to the demand and short timeline. So this is along the same lines. If you could elaborate generally to what extent you can disclose on what elements that the department did analyze in the initial design of the program.
Well, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So as the report noted, the analysis that was done supporting the implementation of the program was done extraordinarily quickly. And as you'd expect, that a program of this magnitude and scope would normally take months of analysis and so on. So you know, we analyzed as much as we could in the time we could. We developed an approach that would be hopefully responsive to the challenges. But we didn't do the kind of analysis that one would normally expect, which I say would take many months of work. But we continue to analyze it beyond, and as we brought forward, or the minister brought forward amendments to the program throughout the course of it to effectively fine tune it, to recognize some of those circumstances that you identified where there were some gaps and so on, and where appropriate, we recommended changes to the program to respond to those.
Thank you, Mr. Marsland. And I understand there's a more detailed report coming forward, I believe February 2022. Are these the types of things that'll be picked up on, the more detailed analysis coming forward?
So yes, we as we said in our response to the report and in the action plan, our intention is to perform a full evaluation of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and publish it in the report on federal tax expenditures, which is tabled with the main estimates. We will do as much as we can. There's always a challenge with data. There's a lag with data, but we will do as thorough analysis as we can with the data available and publish it in that report.
So is the intention to capture up to September 25th, when, if provided the budget gets passed and we're looking at a late September timeline, will that give you enough turnaround to include up to September 25th at the end of the CEWS program?
Well, again, it depends somewhat on the data that's available, but we'll do as much as we can. We'll be as comprehensive as we can in order to publish probably in February, March next year.
Terrific, thank you. Madam Chair, I didn't start my timer. I'm guessing I'm close to the end of my time.
You are. You have about 15 seconds left.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for everybody. Your testimony will be very important for our report.
Thank you, Mr. Longfield. We will now go to Mr. Blanchette-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, je vais faire un point d'information.
I would like to make a point of information in using my time. I wonder if you forgot my motion that I tabled earlier, and Mr. Berthold mentioned that you would examine the motion, but I noticed that you got the meeting started, and we did not debate my motion.
Blanchette-Jonca, we did receive notice of your motion. If you would like to table it now and begin to debate it, we could definitely do that, or we could finish up with our questioning of our witnesses and entertain debate on your motion at the end.
Parfait, Madame.
Fine, Madam Chair. I would like to go ahead with the tabling of my motion, if you please. I would like to explain the notice of motion that you received in both official languages, that the committee invite the following senior official of the Privy Council and of the Auditor General and a legal advisor of the House to explain the administrative measures concerning the use of the concept of cabinet secrecy concerning the finance documents with the Bureau of the Auditor General on the audit on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Documents not available to parliamentarians, although the Auditor General is an officer of the Parliament and not of the government. So you understand, colleagues and committee members, that it's simply a formality in order to have a proper understanding of what was of the impasse we had in our last meeting. And this goes back to 2018. We need to understand more about the internal functioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. Colleagues, you have the motion before you. It is open for debate. Are there any comments, colleagues? Mr. Sobera.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very quickly, because I know we have a number of witnesses here, and I'd like to ask some questions today, and so forth. I just want to know how this would impact the schedule. Would it be with take away time from the meetings we have scheduled with regards to certain topics? Would it be outside the meeting schedule? We would add an additional meeting for it. To have this done. I have no problem with this personally with this motion that Mr. Blanchet-Jonca has put forward, je suis d'accord. If I can say that, but
I agree.
Impact our schedule and how we would schedule something to that extent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sorbera. I know that I began the meeting referring to some comments that I had received from our clerk in regards to our committee receiving a briefing very similar to what Mr. Blanchet-Jonca has outlined. Obviously, it would have an impact on our schedule since we have begun to schedule in all of the other studies. But I would ask either our clerk or our analysts to weigh in on how we might be able to move forward on fitting this in.
Just to comment on the technical side of it, it's very difficult to schedule any extra meetings because all of the meeting times are taken up. A new committee has been created recently, a special committee. So we would have to do it within our schedule. That being said, we could do it if that's the will of the committee. There's no reason that we could not schedule the meeting. It just would have to be within our regular time block.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can our analysts inform us? I believe that this kind of thing, as I mentioned, had already been done previously. How much time can it take? I think they could inform us more about that.
Thank you. Andre?
Oui, merci, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, the last time we had a meeting that lasted 1 hour, so it could be done in an hour or 2 hours in a single meeting, certainly. As regards to the time, of course, the work plan would be tighter. We would have less flexibility for other things. If a problem comes up with a report or if we need to bring back witnesses or things like that. But it remains possible to examine the reports of February and March of the Auditor General and to prepare reports, but it's starting to become tighter, but it is feasible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Longfield.
Yeah, I note that the bells are ringing. My brief comment is if we've already been briefed on this once, maybe we could get a briefing in writing and then no more than an hour discussion since we've already covered this ground.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Longfield. Yes, the bells are ringing, 30-minute bells. Colleagues, I would need unanimous consent to continue sitting while the bells are ringing. I see thumbs up from everyone, so it looks like we have consent to do so. I will be in conversation behind the scenes while with the clerk to figure out how to, we will probably suspend just in order to give you an opportunity to review the vote that's taking place. Any other comments on the timing, the scheduling of this briefing? Mr. Sorbera.
Again, very quickly, an hour sounds very reasonable. As Mr. Longfield said, MP Longfield said, if we can get something in writing, they can come and present for that time period. And if any of us had questions, we could then ask questions rather than doing a full allotment of time to everyone, and people could, follow up with their own questions if they needed to do on their own time as well. But and full on board to support my colleague MP Blanchette Jonca.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I just have a question for the analysts. First of all, between now and May 27th, is it planned for us to study a draft report of the committee?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that, Mr. Berthold?
To have a report to study before the May 27th.
The report that would be in relation to the motion that was the amended motion that was passed earlier?
No. Est-ce que
we have already done some studies, but I would like to know whether the analysts are going to present a report between now and May 27th. Is there a meeting planned for consideration of a report, in which case, as we did Thursday, we could plan right away with the clerk to extend the meeting by an hour from 1 to 2 or from 1 to 1:30 p.m. in order to analyze the study and meet with the people that Mr. Blanchette Jonca wants to meet, and at the same time consider the report and not lose a meeting in order to carry forward with that special information session.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berthold. Andre, I see your hand is up.
Oui. En fait,
yes, actually, initially we had planned a meeting on May 25th to consider the first report that would be available, but because we took a second meeting to consider this subject, and if we had a 1 hour meeting to have an information session, then that would complicate things. But depending on the date that we choose for that information session, then we could perhaps have an initial meeting on 2 draft reports, possibly if we were to do it on May 13th, but we would have to check if we're able to do it. I can't assure you of that right now. Thank you.
Colleagues, it sounds to me like our members around the table are in support of Mr. Blanchette Jonca's motion. We could leave the details of the calendar to the chair and the clerk and the analysts to review the calendar, to propose changes to what we've already put in place, and try to work out a way to fit these things into our calendar if that would meet with your approval. I see Andre has his hand up again. If that's acceptable to you, we could continue our debate on the motion itself, and then determine if you are ready to vote on it. Are there any other comments on the motion? I do not see any. Are you ready for me to call the question on Mr. Blanchette Jonca's motion? It looks like you are.
could it be unanimous?
Madam Clerk, do we need to have a recorded vote?
If the committee is in agreement, there's no discord, then it can be by unanimous consent. Otherwise, we have to have a recorded provision.
Thank you very much. Do we have unanimous consent to? We do. We absolutely do. Thank you, colleagues. That motion is passed unanimously. And the clerk and the analysts and I will take a look at our calendar to see how we can manipulate it to fit all of the things in that we have agreed to do. All right, Mr. Blanchette-Jocas, we will return to you for your line of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there's another point of information, just to understand the absence of Mr. Sabia, the Deputy Minister of Finance. When did you learn that he would be absent? Did you learn this at the beginning of the session of the committee?
We learned it, I believe we learned that he was not going to be available. Was it early this morning, Madam Clerk?
It was confirmed early this morning that he had a conflict. They did let us know yesterday that he wouldn't be able to attend.
Yes.
Okay. Just comprendre.
It's just to understand, Madam Chair and Madam Clerk, in the end of people being absent, normally we learn this at the beginning of the session. We prepare our questions according to them, and then the people that are supposed to appear before us at the committee are not there. Are these things that normally occur? To my mind, it's not the same for the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchette-Jocas. In my opening remarks, I did state that Mr. Sabia sent his regrets. I do recognize that you came prepared to possibly have the opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses who were in attendance on Thursday. Unfortunately, with a conflict in his schedule, he could not be here today. We do have the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister with us, but I do take your point.
Écoutez, Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, we'll continue then and not spend time on that. I'll use my time. Is it preferable for us to know in advance, though? If you had known yesterday, I understand that you're not doing emails 24 hours a day, but there are a lot of people right now who are working to prepare committees. And when we don't hear the people we expect, then it changes the planning we have to make. So that was my information item. Thank you for clarifying that, Madam Chair, Madam Clerk. Mr. Marsland, I'd like to move ahead with the questions. Mr. Marsland, I'm trying to understand in cabinet secrets what was done. Is it the type of thing that we normally see at the Department of Finance?
If I understand the question correctly, Madam Chair, it's how we prepared proposals for policies to be implemented, and typically these are brought forward for approval in the context of cabinet confidence, where they involve legislative change, as did this program.
Okay, just bien comprendre, Monsieur.
Just to understand you, Mr. Marsland, you do not decide whether it's a cabinet secrecy or confidence. It's a Privy Council that tells you not to reveal the information to the committee. Is that exact?
Well, I'm not sure, Madam Chair, that I would characterize the process that way. The process is that proposals are prepared, recommendations are prepared by the public service. They're brought forward to ministers. And it's not that on a document-by-document basis that decisions are made. These documents are, by their nature, cabinet confidences, and therefore protected by the legislative and policy protections in place.
La question, Monsieur Marsland.
My question, Mr. Marsland, is it the Department of Finance who decides what's confidential, or is it the Privy Council?
That means.
Is it your department? That's my question.
It is essentially the nature of the document that dictates its protection. So the document is a document that brings forward recommendations that require approval by ministers, and that is the nature that characterizes the document. It's not a decision in relation to the document, it's the nature of the document itself.
No. Mr. Marsland.
Mr. Marsland, who makes the decision, the Department of Finance or the Privy Council, regardless of the nature of the document?
Well, again, Madam Chair, I don't think it's a decision that's made. It's the nature of the document itself that dictates its status, and ultimately who decides as to what.
According to the nature of the document relating to the report by the Auditor General, who made the decision, who made the decision, the Department of Finance or the Privy Council?
Well, when we provided all of the documents that are relevant to the Auditor General's work.
Mr. Marcelin, you're not answering the question. You're preventing me from doing my work as a member of the Committee on Public Accounts. I do not have the information from the report of the Auditor General. The role of the committee is to determine the efficiency of the programs and whether they are in conformity with the policies, and you're not giving the information. So how can I do my role as a member of the committee today if I don't have access to the documents relating to your department?
Well, Madam Chair, this is not my decision to make in terms of whether a cabinet confidence is released to the committee. There are legal provisions in place that protect those, and it's not my decision to release them to the committee.
So, Mr. Marcelin, your department never decided whether those pieces of information should be made public or not. Is that true?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. It is not the department's decision as to whether or not those documents are made public. They are protected by cabinet confidence.
Fine. And who establishes the confidence of the committee, Mr. Marcelin?
Well, I think that's certainly not my role, and I think there has been discussion earlier in the committee, Madam Chair, as to seeking or the expertise as to the application of cabinet confidence to documents.
Mr. Marcelin, you're not answering the question. It's not the first time that your department has not given the Public Accounts Committee information. Do you remember the meeting in November when we asked you for the information on electronic commerce taxation with Mr. Sabia's predecessor, Mr. Rochon? You were there. I asked the question. I asked for an answer in writing. In December, you answered the same thing, but didn't answer the question. We had to call Mr. Sabia before the committee to get an answer. So the same things are being repeated. It's the same old disc going around and around. It involves taxpayers' money, and it's a program that is historic. How many billions, Mr. Marcelin, in public funds for the wage subsidy?
A very short answer, Mr. Marcelin.
So the question, I think, is the last question was how many billions? So the amount that has been paid out so far by the Canada Revenue Agency is, I believe, $74 billion. And the estimates for the program were provided in last week's budget.
Thank you very much. We will now go on to Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to be here on behalf of Mr. Green today. My questions, I think I'm going to focus on the Canada Revenue Agency. In section 7.50 of the report, the audit had noticed that for fiscal 2019-20, the agency had 273 full-time equivalent employees for the enforcement of GST, HST delinquent filer compliance. The salary expenditures were 27.7 million, but those employees had a fiscal impact of about 3.2 billion during that year. So that's sort of an investment that has a return of more than 100 to 1. And the fiscal impact included the federal tax, provincial tax, interest, and penalties collected. And the recommendation was that given the good return on investment, there was an encouragement for the agency to do more work. So basically that the CRA should strengthen its efforts towards tax compliance on GST, HST, and so on. My question is just regarding the 273 full-time equivalents for the enforcement of GST, HST filer compliance. Does this represent an increase or a decrease, or is it pretty much status quo compared to fiscal years preceding that?
Madam Chair, it's Bob Hamilton here, and I apologize for having joined the call late, but I was able to get in a few minutes after it started, but I did have another meeting that I had to finish up. I would turn to one of my colleagues to talk about the specifics of whether that amount of resources is more or less than previous years. I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I think just in terms of the question that you asked about the revenue generated by this program and the 100-to-1 ratio. We do recognize we run things on a risk-based analysis here. And one of the commitments that we have had in our action plan is to take a look at the delinquent filer program, make sure that we're allocating resources appropriately, that it's meeting expectations, and to look forward to whether we need to make any changes to increase the efficiency and the output of that program. But it is something that we identified as potential, and we can see that with the resources we had, we were able to generate additional revenues. And we always look at continuously improving our programs. And in the action plan, we committed to do this. But perhaps I'll turn it to my colleague to answer that specific question on the level of resources.
So if I may, it's Martin Vigneault here. Alors, le niveau de ressources.
So the level of resources is constant compared to previous years. The program continued at the same level of investment.
That clarification. Mr. Hamilton, I guess you partly answered my follow-up question, but just really on the determination of what an adequate level of staffing is to ensure proper compliance. Can you really just sort of illustrate a little bit more some of the thoughts that go into making that determination?
Yes, Madam Chair. Well, I think at the most global level, we have to look at the resources we have at our disposal at the agency and try to put them towards the most effective places, so that we don't have unlimited resources to do everything. So we have to take, as I said, a risk-based approach to figure out whether we've got the right amount of resources on that particular program, in this case, the delinquent filer program. Within that, we look at what the returns or efficiency to the program would be. And one thing you need to recognize is that when you put a certain amount of resources to a program, you can have a high return, say 100-to-1 in your example. As you put more resources in, it becomes harder and harder, and we see that rate of return would typically decline. I'm not saying it would in this case, but it would typically decline. So we have to look at how valuable would the additional resources be on this delinquent filer program relative to other things that we could do. And that's where we use our intelligence and our risk-based systems to try to calibrate that. And as I've said, as a result of the pandemic exercise, we are going to take another look at this program and see if it could be more optimal.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I just want to get one last question. I've just got under a minute here. So the CRA's response to the Auditor General, you said actions in response to this recommendation will include a review of workload selection and prioritization criteria, examination of the level and allocation of program resources, identification of potential legislative changes, and an increased outreach to increase compliance regarding GST, HST filing. The action plan will be completed by September 2023. Why will it take you more than 2 years to complete this review?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start on that one, and then I'll turn to my colleague. And I think the first thing I'd like to say is that it's not that everything will wait till 2023. We're going to make progress, obviously, in the coming months and over the course of the next year. But some things will take longer. And I think the one thing to recognize for us as the agency is that these new programs, like the wage subsidy, come in addition to our core programs that we run every year. We have quite a big machine here in terms of delivering service to Canadians and compliance. And so as we go through and think about what to do with a particular program or how to improve, we have to make sure that we're thinking about it with the lessons we've learned in the pandemic, but also how it fits together with our core program. So those things can take some time, but we will be seeing progress between now and 2023 in terms of the operation of the program, the efficiency, and the identification of some lessons learned.
Thank you very much. If it was going to be turned over to your colleague, Mr. Hamilton, it would need to be a very short answer.
So I would, if possible, Madam Chair, I would simply add that there will be some changes also eventually to systems. So those take time, and that's why we intend to have done that by that date.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lemieux. Colleagues, we are getting closer to the time of our vote, so I will suspend the meeting for now to allow you to prepare for the vote and ask that you return as soon as possible so that we may resume our meeting with our witnesses. minutes left in our scheduled meeting, which means we have just enough time to get through the next 2 rounds of questions. So I will move to Mr. Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. A couple of fairly brief questions I'm hoping for Mr. Hamilton, and I will yield the Ms. Weber. Mr. Hamilton, I did note that the budget had some additional funding for IT and other support in there. My question is, if in fact the budget had been a year earlier, would we be a little bit further ahead if we'd been able to get the resources to you quicker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important to recognize that we have a very sophisticated, well-funded IT system here. So we're quite confident in it. It's true that one could always do more, and we look forward to using some of the IT expenditures to improve our system. And in fact, in some cases, it's ongoing maintenance and improvements to the existing system. So I'm not sure. It's a hypothetical question. Could we have done more if it had been a year earlier? I'm pretty confident that we have a well-funded IT system, but we do look for increased funding to respond to additional pressures that we see on the horizon.
Thank you. A diplomatic answer for sure. And also, Mr. Hamilton, just on that, last year, your department at the direction of the government was gracious enough to give Canadians additional time to file their taxes. Our party has, of course, been calling for that as well. Of course, you're not involved in policy, that's for the government, but would it be possible, technically possible, to delay the tax filing as you did last year while Canadians continue to receive their benefits, such as the wage subsidy?
Madam Chair, I would just note 2 points. Obviously, the tax filing season is approaching on April 30th. And I would just highlight a few things that would come into play were we to extend the tax filing season in a hypothetical way in terms of what goes on each year. The most important thing I would flag is that we rely on tax filings to be able to deliver benefits for the child benefit, for example, or the GST credit in the upcoming year. And the time is actually relatively short in there. We need to get the filing, establish eligibility, and get the payments out in relatively short order for the July start of the new year. So if one delays the filing season, there can be quite an impact on the ability of us to deliver benefits in a timely way.
If I could kindly interject, though, as there was, I believe, last year, there are potential fixes to that, correct?
We do the best we can if we have to. But one of the advantages for us is if we have a long lead time to think about that. So that's one consideration. I think from my perspective, the government has taken a number of steps to try to recognize the unique circumstances that we're in during the pandemic to make it easier for people to file. And I would say from our side on the compliance effort, we do engage in discussions on payment plans if people find that the burden of paying their taxes is too onerous at the beginning. They can talk to us and we can try to come up with some sort of a revised payment plan for them. So we have mechanisms to try to make it easier for Canadians. But this year, the filing deadline will be April 30th.
But I'll just take that as a yes, and then I'll field the answer. I'll yield the time to Mr. Weber there. Obviously, it was done the year before, and so obviously it would be able to be done again. And a little disappointed that you weren't able to say that, Mr. Hamilton. Sorry, Mr. Weber, please.
Mr. Weber, you will have 1 minute.
Do we have Mr. Weber?
It looks like we've lost Mr. Weber.
I will continue on then. That's fine. Sorry, Mr. Hamilton. With no disrespect, it would have been and would be possible I'm not asking for all the great things the CRA does for Canadians, and I have no doubt to agree with you that that's true. But it would be and would have been possible to delay the tax filing deadline as it was last year, correct? Just yes or no is fine.
If you're asking me as of right now, if possible, I would say no. Is it technically possible in a given year to delay it? Yes, it is technically possible with enough advanced work.
So it was possible then for the CRA to delay the tax filing if the government had so chosen to give it people who are going through a pandemic, especially given the fact that you've locked out nearly 1 million Canadians from their My account. And this has been something that's been requested by CPAs, accountants, Canadians across the border. It took 2 years to file a budget, and yet we can't give Canadians 2 months to delay their tax returns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. We are over time. I will now move to Mr. Sorbera for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Again, Auditor General, thank you for the series of reports. I've been able to go over with a fine-tooth comb over all of them. I read the Investing in Canada plan last night and reviewed the Q's report again this morning. And I think one thing coming out of the pandemic that we will for sure do, and every organization will for sure do, is review its systems and processes. And when I think of a supply chain for a company, bringing products into Canada, whether it's a grocery store, manufacturing of any extent, I also think of an organization much like the Canada Revenue Agency, ESDC, Finance, in its ability to deliver services, in this case, benefits to Canadians during the pandemic, whether it's the 7 or odd so programs that CRA has had to deliver to Canadians, with obviously the design and format, with the help of other departments, finance, ESDC, and so forth. And Auditor General, I look at your recommendations and I see recommendation 7.58 to improve the integrity and validation efficiency of any future emergency programs. The CRA should use automated validations with unique identifier that can be used in all programs. And then I go to 7.68 in terms of further, I believe it's recommendations, but put 7.68. In our view, the situation demonstrates the need for the agency to have sub-annual data and up-to-date earnings and tax data when it administers income support programs with eligibility criteria based on sub-annual earnings. And I think of that in what's in this report, and I look to two things. And this is a question for what's happening with the unique identifier issue, or the unique, I don't want to call it issue, but unique identifier program and the work that's being done there. And also what's in our budget on page 311, e-payroll to help businesses. I'm someone who thinks forward looking in terms of where and how do we improve our processes and our information that's available to organizations, be it finance, CRA, ESDC. So how important is it that we continue improving our processes with the unique identifier system, that unique identifier number, if I can call it that, and the development of e-payroll? First, I'll turn to the Auditor General, then to the CRA and to finance, please.
So one of our recommendations does ask the government to consider a unique identifier. And while many will say that every Canadian has one now, it's our social insurance number, that is a unique identifier that we want to protect for privacy and identity theft reasons. And that's why a unique identifier that would allow a Canadian to interact with many departments or many programs across the government is an option that the government should be looking at. It is available in other countries. It would allow the government to protect the identity as well as facilitate interaction between an individual and its government. So there's a lot of things to work out through that, but it is something that should be looked at. That's different from accessing systems, right? Adding layers of protection to access systems, which is always beneficial and always needed. That's just that other layer of protection for cybersecurity.
Thank you, Auditor General. To move over to the CRA and to finance, please. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, perhaps I'll take that question for this part before going to finance. I guess you've raised two issues, and I won't repeat what the Auditor General said, but certainly we are interested in securing our systems as much as possible. We believe we have a secure system. We've taken some actions in addition to that to respond to new threats. But the biggest thing on the horizon is the Government of Canada-wide initiative to look at Sign In Canada. So providing an identifier, a digital ID that could be used across the government. So that's a project that's in train. It'll take a little bit of time to come to fruition, but it provides a great opportunity. On the issue of real-time data, obviously it would always be better to have real-time data. We do need to think about our systems, the burdens on Canadian businesses, et cetera. But as you noted in the budget, there is funding provided to start some work on what would be an e-payroll system to get more timely payroll data, which would be beneficial in a circumstance like we just went through. But hopefully the consultations will show that it would be beneficial in the longer term, even without a pandemic. So we look forward to launching those consultations and finding out what people think about that and where the opportunities are. It won't be something that can come very quickly, but I think it does have at least potential at this stage.
So for finance, it would have to be a very, very short answer as we are over time.
I can't really add anything to Mr. Hamilton's answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Chair.
Marsland. We will now go to our 2.5-minute round, starting with Mr. Blanchette-Jonca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point of information. Would it be possible to extend the meeting because of the 2 votes that we had with the witnesses and the colleagues to see if they're available to continue?
I think I would need to seek the will of the committee members. We have had longer with our witnesses than we would have had we continued meeting last Thursday. I think we ended up not continuing with our witnesses for the last 45 minutes of our meeting. So I'm certainly at the will of the committee if you would like us to check to see with the technicians if we could actually continue on, but I will let others speak. Mr. Blois.
Madam Chair, unfortunately, I'm not available after this time. I will start trying to put a little bit more time between the committee business and my other work and activities. But as you can appreciate, there's other things to get done. So I'm hoping we can wrap up relatively short.
Mr. Berthold.
Unfortunately, I also cannot remain longer today. I'm very sorry that I can't. I would have liked to support my colleague, but today is not possible for me to stay after 1 p.m.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other interventions, I will make the decision that we will end at 1 o'clock. I know that votes do have a way of impeding the work of committees, and that's some of the reality that we work within as members of Parliament. I have suspended the clock, Mr. Blanchette-Jonca, so if you would like to continue with your round of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Marsland, the Department of Finance of Canada does a partial analysis of the wage program and then a complete analysis in July with the changes to the program. The Auditor General then did a report on the wage subsidy, but told us that she cannot provide us the detailed information on your analyses because they're classified as secret. I'm trying to find out who made the decision that they would be secret. Is it the Department of Finance or the Privy Council? Who is leading?
Well, thank you for the question again. So the decision, we provided all of the documents that that are relevant to the Auditor General. Those documents included cabinet confidences. We assessed those documents. We reviewed them to make sure that they were appropriately classified, and then we proceeded from there. So the documents were the documents.
Mr. Marsland, I'm going to break you off there. I'm not quite sure what to say. you're not answering the question. Who makes the decision? Is it the finance or is it the Privy Council? That's what we want to know. You're spending huge amounts on a program, more than $100 billion, and then you don't want to tell us, well, okay, we don't share the information of our analysis. It's not serious. There's a lack of transparency in your department. In addition, you don't answer the question and you don't share the analyses of the program and the information and data. So why don't you answer the question? Who made the decision? Is it your department or the Privy Council? I think that's clear. Those are the two possible answers, A or B.
My apologies. Madam Chair, we reviewed the documents. We ensured they were appropriately reviewed and determined that the classifications were appropriate to them. So ultimately, it was our assessment that those documents were cabinet competence.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Donc, si je comprends
Martin.
bien.
Perfect. If I understand, then.
Mr. Blanchette-Jocas. We will now move on to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes.
Madam Chair, actually, I don't have any further questions, so I'm okay from my end.
All right. Then I will bring our meeting to, I will draw our meeting to an end. I want to let you know, I have heard from our very diligent clerk, Andre, who has informed me that they've looked at the schedule, and if we were to hold a 1-hour briefing on May 13th, we could have 2 draft reports to study in the second hour, and we will definitely make changes to the calendar to reflect that. Mr. Longfield, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just wanted to confirm that Thursday's meeting will be addressing boiled water advisories.
Yes.
Okay, so today's meeting will be rescheduled to another point, or the one that was scheduled for today will be at another point.
Yes, yes, we wanted to not disrupt our calendar as much as possible.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, thank you so much. Witnesses, thank you for making yourself available to us today. We certainly appreciate it. Colleagues, is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Thank you very much. We are adjourned.